it's probably simpler for the tech companies to sell and B, solve the problem.
Yes, yeah. They shouldn't just be going for the big players.
Yeah, agree. There's too many gates to go through on the big players.
Too many, yeah. And they've got all of these legacy issues as well.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Future We Build. My guest this week is Sammy Pahal, Managing Director of the UK Proptech Association. Following the merger with BPF last year and the upcoming merger to create Real Estate UK, this new alliance will represent hundreds of real estate companies and proptech companies and be the single voice of real estate. Our conversation today touches on this merger and what it means for proptech, talk about the current state of adoption in the market and some of the existing challenges, and we talk about what needs to change, in particular with the looming AI disruption. We also address the key challenge of connecting with the long tail of real estate owners and managers. It's a broad-ranging conversation about the need for digital transformation and how the sector can realise the value of proptech. Let's dive in. So, welcome to this episode of The Future Build, and thank you for joining, Sammy. So today my guest is Sammy Pahal, Managing Director of UK Proptech Association, and I wanted to speak to you because obviously, we've known each other for a while. Back in the days when I was trying to sort of innovate within JLL, in the trials and tribulations of that. And I guess in some ways, I guess that's kind of where a lot of this all started and your journey started. And, obviously there's been success stories and there's been challenges and, almost like 10 years on, I guess, what's working, what's not working. And I guess from my perspective, having then obviously gone into a sort of another corporate role, trying to be, I guess, a customer and in some ways trying to influence the adoption and use of sort of smarter, more digital tools to try and streamline some of these processes. Just how challenging that is.
It's a tough job.
Trying to move, trying to move industry and move companies. And now I'm sort of been spat out the other side. I'm now, in this position of having conversations, and I was sort of thinking about, okay, well, how has that last 10 years sort of gone? And obviously, sort of linked within that, the role of the UKPA, and obviously I get you to sort of just introduce it and talk about it, but it's obviously then gone through a bit of a change in most recent years with obviously BPF and now the establishment of Real Estate UK. So maybe let's start there, just a little bit about you, but then sort of in the context of, I guess, this journey that you've been on through that, I guess, that arc, and then most recently, I guess, how that merger has happened with BPF, what has that meant and what's that looked like, I suppose, in the last year, and then maybe just sort of touch on what's happening right now, which is this new Real Estate UK group that we all need to get familiar with.
Great, yeah. No, well, firstly, thank you for having me. It's
Very welcome.
Great to be here. And it has been quite a journey. We have known each other for almost 10 years, probably, since the very beginning of UKPA forming, which was in 2017. So. It's been an interesting journey. My background, I don't know whether you I'm sure you probably know this already.
I know, because I did a bit of research on it.
Okay.
But I hadn't known until I was doing this. So.
Yeah, so I'm not really a tech person or a property person. Yeah. But my background is in psychology. So, and it's interesting because actually I think, I'm sure we'll come on to this, but psychology really plays such a critical role when you are going through any sort of change, and that's no different, I think, in business context when you're bringing in technology and you're trying to innovate. So it's actually been quite helpful to have that sort of background knowledge and that kind of mindset that brings as well when you study psychology.
So you understand why people are being resistant and understand
why it's being so slowly. Yeah. It doesn't mean you can solve it necessarily, but understanding is the first step, I think. But yeah, my background was in psychology, and then I just kind of fell into PropTech, if you like, as we all do.
People that fall into real estate and maybe PropTech as well.
Absolutely. But it's been interesting because I was working at Ordnance Survey when PropTech was just becoming a thing, and the partners at OS were using location data in their solutions and platforms, and then trying to sell those to the property industry. So they were the first kind of PropTech companies that I'd come across. And then I got introduced to the founder of UKPA and joined as the first employee. And that was a big learning curve for me, moving from big government-owned company, 1,000 employees, to just me and the founder of UKPA.
Who was that again? Remind me.
Eddie Holmes.
That's right. Of course it was. Yeah.
I'm sure people will know him.
Yeah.
So yeah, and in a way, I suppose that has given me a good experience to be able to relate to startups, especially those that have come from a corporate background to just working on their own sort of thing. So and I mean, in terms of what we do at UK Proptech Association, so it was set up to drive digital transformation of the UK property industry, when that was kind of the big buzzword at the time, digital transformation, and everyone was trying to understand, what does that actually mean? How do you procure PropTech solutions? What is PropTech? That was the big kind of conversation.
Remember those conversations? Is this PropTech or is this not PropTech?
Exactly.
It seems so aged now. But
and I think we have defined it somewhat now, but of course there's still sort of crossovers with other areas of technology as well. But the conversation, I'd say, has shifted from, well, what is PropTech? Why do we need it? To how do we actually transform a business? How do we innovate? To now, even how do we get the right sort of foundations in place to be able to use PropTech more effectively? So I think it has really sort of shifted. And our role as UKPA is to really bridge the gap between PropTechs and their understanding of the property world, and then the property side's understanding of what PropTech solutions exist in the market, and the role that it can add to their organisations, the value it can bring. And I think it's sometimes, we hear this question of, well, is PropTech just finding problems to solve? And there is a little bit of that, but I also think sometimes you don't know what the problems are until somebody actually
make the market. Right?
Exactly. So there is a bit of that, and I think our role really is to facilitate conversations and bring both sides together through our events programs. And now, of course, it's much easier to do that as part of BPF now that we have access to more real estate professionals.
So that's been the main benefit, I suppose, of the PPF piece, to start there, is just obviously you're immediately then part of that wider membership. So access to their events and obviously all of their platforms, I suppose, is just a much easier accessibility from both sides.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we had our events in the early days, in the heads of innovation coming to our events. So you were there, and that was great because those were people that clearly got it. But you can only get so far, and as you said, in your role, you've had to influence internally. And so I also think part of what we can do is to support heads of innovation and CTOs and CIOs be able to influence internally as well, by getting the right people to our events to really to hear from people outside of their organisation who might be saying similar things to what they're saying, and then also hearing how other real estate organisations are innovating. I think often change comes because of fear of being left behind and not innovating fast enough. The question I get from a lot of the real estate companies is, can you tell us what our competitors are doing? So I think that's really where we can add value.
For 10 years, that's how we made money out of it as a consultant model, basically. It's like that's how the industry works. It's crazy.
Exactly.
So bringing it up to today, and was it this beginning of the turn of the year, is the Real Estate UK officially?
So officially, it will happen in April, the merger. So we've got the brand out there. We're sort of trying to get people more familiar with their website. A kind of landing page at the moment is there, and we're working on some sort of flagship events for this year.
And this is really just bringing together an even broader set of, I guess, traditional real estate players, all under one umbrella.
It's really to create a stronger voice and representative body of UK real estate.
Into government or generally, I suppose?
I think there's a lot that will happen in terms of engaging with government and having a stronger voice.
That was always a challenge, wasn't it? It's like, who is the voice of real estate? And and I guess from a regulatory perspective, particularly, in the context of this podcast and what I do around sustainability, a lot of it has been driven by regulation. We've obviously got MEES and EPCs in the UK, but I think a clearer channel into government around what is actually that we need. What's the voice, what's working, what's not working. Because I remember I used to sit on the BPF Sustainability Committee way back when, but that's just one voice of many. So I think that hopefully will make it easier, and I guess through your through you and then into the broader world of prop tech, sort of connecting them into that communication and that channel should only be a good thing, and help sort, as you said earlier, like which ones are actually solving real problems and what are the problems that need to be solved. So, okay.
Yeah, and we as UKPA have been doing some advocacy and lobbying work on behalf of the prop tech sector. And it's been quite reactive, to be honest. And then over the last year or so, we formed a relationship with MHCLG. So we've got a prop tech growth partnership now with government, and they've funded us to work with the industry to understand, what are the things that need to happen to be able to scale prop tech faster. So that's with a particular lens,
I guess, on it's residential, obviously, but is there a particular sort of subset of that, or is it general?
Yeah, so the overarching kind of aim is to drive adoption of technology in housing. So to be able to deliver against the 1.5 million homes target. So that is the kind of focus.
Delivery side.
Yeah. But everything that we're doing is also with the lens of, well, how does this support the prop tech sector more broadly as well? And I think one of the other benefits that we've had since merging with BPF is being able to tap into the policy team within the BPF. They have a really strong policy team internally who all have relationships with different parts of government and different areas of expertise. And so now I think it's an opportunity for us to really weave in, especially where they're working on campaigns with government to show, to talk about what needs to happen. How can we bring the tech angle to that? And make sure that we're promoting the use of technology to solve some of these issues as well.
And I find, 100%, and I find that even just sort of, and I guess it's education, it just takes time, but like you say, that still, I think, but certainly for a while, the audience or the customer, quote unquote, the real estate, I guess, owners, investors, marketplace, there was as you said earlier, like when defining what it is, what does it even mean? And I think still, depending on which part of the value chain you're in, when you hear the word prop tech, you immediately have a thought about, well, is that widgets in a building to make it smarter, or is that, as you said earlier, like is that sort of planning based sort of geospatial stuff? Is that portfolio wide kind of analytics stuff? There's so many variants, obviously, within that full kind of value chain of real estate. So wherever you sit within that value chain, it means something very different to you. And as you say, to try and like connect in with both the market and then obviously further into government around policy, navigating, that policy is going to drive this particular part of the market rather than this part, and how's that going to influence and what needs to happen and what are the digital technologies that are going to sort of solve that. I think just having that, dare I say it, kind of translator to help the market understand, well, this is the segment of prop tech that we're actually talking about in relation to this policy or this driver, rather than the sort of paintbrush of like, well, it's prop tech generally. Because there are just this, and as you say, it's sort of on either side. It verges into climate tech, or it verges into fintech, or it verges into something else. So I think just you and your organisation having that ability to just help guide, and I guess more than anything, the customer, right? Is like, what am I looking for, and who am I actually trying to do business with, or what do I need? And I guess moving on to that, like in terms of where we are now. We're 10 years, I guess, down the road from like, at least when we sort of started. Do you see, like, is there a much better, quote unquote, marketplace for your members? Like, are they speaking to more informed clients? Is there an easier route to clients? Are there, maybe back then it was a little bit like we found a solution, we're now trying to find a problem to offer it. Is it now maybe the other way around, where the industry is like, okay, well, I now know my problems, or at least I have an understanding of what they are, therefore I know that I need a solution for it. Just curious to know kind of how you sort of lens at right now, and we'll obviously talk a little bit about kind of what needs to change or what might happen in the future, but with regard to right now, is it better than it was? And if it is, kind of how would you sort of, I guess, define kind of how we currently, I don't know, it's a big question because there's laggards and there's leaders and it's different parts of the value chain, but just curious to kind of get your take on that.
So I'd say generally speaking there is a greater level of understanding of what tech solutions are out there, how it can solve problems, and even how to kind of navigate innovation internally and how to go through digital transformation. So I would say, there is a level of maturity there now that we didn't see early on. But
just to ask you on that, sorry, just pause. But do you think that's limited only to the big sort of blue chip big organisations that have the resources to do that, or would you say that that's also kind of translated through to, because obviously a lot of real estate, particularly on the ownership side, is owned by small, medium, sometimes single family or family offices, etc. I'm just curious to know, like, do you think it's still that what you're saying is only at the top end, or is it blending through?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I would say it is probably the larger organisations that have the resources to invest in people that can understand how to do that. It's the Grey Stars and the Enduran and British Land and Granger, etc., who have innovation teams who have that expertise and can translate that to the CEOs. I think the smaller organisations, there is definitely a willingness, and I think there's maturity across the board in terms of understanding what tech can do. I don't think we're in a world now where people are burying their heads in the sand anymore. But in terms of actually maturity as a buyer, that varies, and I think maturity of execution is another question, because I don't think that the execution bit is as mature as people would think.
Well, funny enough, we've had Paul Vatton from CQ on another episode, and one of the problems he's trying to solve is that execution piece, particularly around like decarbonisation. But and again, it's interesting to hear you say that, because having been in the seat of the innovation role, the job is obviously connect the dots internally, go outside and figure out what's out there, speak to clients, obviously in the context of JLL, speak to clients, figure out what their problems are. So a lot of it is just running around trying to figure out, there are solutions to this problem. Yes, we can line it up, but then it's like, okay, now you've actually got to do it. And how are you going to do it? And that takes budget, takes time, OPEX or whatever it is, and it takes willingness, and back to your earlier point, right? Change. It takes change management, and so you need to find a sponsor within the business. And typically, innovation roles, they might have a small budget, but that's more to do sort of POCs and tests. To genuinely get it into the business, you need the COO, or you need someone like that to. So it's interesting that it's. Would you say that it's characteristically that it's still the innovation teams, quote unquote, or the person that's sort of most interested, or the person who's sort of doing it from an innovation perspective, is still the main sort of link in to to the solutions, or is it sort of becoming more like the CTO, or if they have a CTO, which obviously sometimes they don't.
I think it is becoming. The ownership is now sitting more with the CTOs and CIOs.
It needs to.
I'm definitely seeing that more, and I'm seeing that actually there is more endorsement and support from the CEOs as well. We had a panel event a couple of weeks ago, our kickoff for the Tech Innovation Programme. Yes, it was great. It was the first time I'd had a chance to really speak to the CEOs of British Land, Granger, Enduran, and we had the sort of director of innovation for Canary Wharf Group as well. And it was quite clear from that actually they are looking at this now as a strategic thing, not just innovation and people running off and doing PropTech pilots. They are thinking about, well, how does this actually align with their business strategy to future-proof their organisations? And especially, I think that's been driven by AI, of course. Everybody is wanting to understand how they can make sure that they're ready for being able to leverage AI and what's the disruption that might come from that as well. And there's a recognition that they need to have more of a holistic strategy around this, and that they also then need to get the plumbing right, the foundations right. And that's what I'm seeing now actually, is that because we set up an Innovation Leaders Forum in the BPF. So post merging, this is a group of about 30 people from BPF membership companies who are responsible for tech and innovation in their organisations. And now the kind of key theme I'm seeing is they're all looking at how do they get the plumbing right? How do they How do they create the stronger tech stacks? How do they fix the data issues that they might have? How do they integrate their platforms with other PropTech platforms and consolidate, rather than having lots of different PropTech companies or platforms that they're working with?
Yeah. I mean, obviously AI, right? It's the elephant in the room. It's the thing that's going to potentially change everything. But question, I suppose, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're seeing this, is certainly in terms of the new startups coming through. I'm guessing a very high percentage of them have got AI in the name, or at least they're AI first companies. But I'm not surprised. In fact, actually, I wrote an article on this particular. I mean, obviously, again within the context of sustainability, particularly. Actually, the third article came out today, so this timestamps this episode. But it was exactly that point, which is, AI. There's a lot of hype around AI, and obviously, if you go into an LLM, you're going to ask it a question, and it will give you an answer. Of course it will, but that answer might be completely false. And so in the context of business, and if you want to use that kind of technology to ask, how well is my building performing, or how do you can't get it to hallucinate, right? It needs to be grounded on real data, and it needs to be coming from a place where that data is probably auditable, at least if you're a regulated industry. So the premise, which is exactly what you're saying, is in order to leverage that kind of capability, you need to have a really kind of clear data set from where that's coming from.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just going to be asking it and getting fictional answers back.
Yeah.
They'll sound really good, but that's so critical. And I think it's funny that on this sort of 10-year journey we've been on, I remember even back in the day of JLL, but the message has always been, I think, from literally on every panel I think I've ever sat on, is data, right? It's just get our data sorted, our data sorted. And it's interesting that sort of until now, this sort of burning platform of AI, or the threat, I suppose, of AI coming, people have realised, okay, we absolutely have to get this sorted.
Finally need to sort it out.
There's a lot of investment and time now being spent on, okay, well, what is the data? What data's ours, and what do we need in that kind of central core? And then what information data it needs to plug into that. So I think it's, as you say, it's probably helping reshape, and a bit of consistency, I suppose, in reshaping how the industry is going to start looking at it and working. So, and actually, funnily enough, it sort of leads me to another point, which was around maybe the change. And again, I'd be curious to get your thoughts from what you're seeing. But in terms of the suppliers coming into the market, there's the sort of traditional sort of SaaS sales dashboard type service. Log in, here's a dashboard, I've presented all your information to you. Perhaps the new world is you just plug in and the data's going straight into your data warehouse. There is no dashboard, there's no login. That's the service. And then you can obviously plug it in and plug it out. But that requires a level of maturity in the business to be able to operate that way. So I think those that are sort of equipping themselves, which by the sounds of it, if they've got CTOs or innovation leads that are sort of pushing for that, that's, in my head anyway, that's sort of being AI ready, is getting that capability right, so that you can then go out and go, well, we just need to plug in this data stream, or when we acquire a new asset, okay, how do we plug that data stream into this core? Which I think it should make it easier, because I think, and again, I suppose the question to you would be around just and I forget what the number is, but I remember when we were sort of working, in fact, I think when I was a board member of UKPA, there was like quotes of I think 8,000 PropTechs in Europe, I think was a number I seem to remember in my head. And so, one of the things always was, when you go back into real estate, I was like, there's just so many solutions, like how do I even know where to start? I'm just curious, in terms of, do you think that number's shrunk? Do you think that number's grown? There's obviously been a little bit of consolidation. Obviously, there's been some people, I'm sure, some companies that haven't managed to survive. But kind of, what's your take? Is that still as a confusing marketplace? Yeah,
well, I think the figure that we quoted back then, in terms of UK-based PropTechs, was around 795 or 800. Okay. And according to the report that we did with MHCLG last year, it's around 795 companies. So it hasn't really, I mean, still a lot that we've seen companies that have folded, we've seen new companies emerge, but it stayed as a total number, it stayed relatively the same. And in the report last year as well, we also found that is a declining number of new companies emerging in PropTech.
Yeah.
But in terms of PropTech investment, it's coming back up again.
I was going to ask that, okay, because there's been obviously a lot of talk. I mean, particularly from my lens around, when I look at it, it's more around sort of climate tech, PropTech. Yeah. But there's definitely been a slowdown of, looking at sort of climate tech investment. But I was just curious in terms of the VC, and money coming into PropTech more generally. That obviously, like everywhere in the market, obviously the economy and everything else, it's been tough. So I'm sure we've seen that. But I was just curious, has that happened? But you're mentioning that it's now starting to tick up again.
Yeah,
okay.
It is starting to pick up again now. I think it's just going into already established scaling companies.
Right, yeah, okay.
And less so in early stage new organisations, new startups.
Okay. Funny enough, I've read something along those lines, I think 3 or 4 times in the last couple of weeks about if you're now a founder looking for VC, it's not just about an idea on a PowerPoint.
No, it really isn't.
You need revenue. You need proven business, which is tough, right? But it's from the founder's perspective, it's more tough. But it sort of shows as well that the maturity, I suppose, of that capital coming in and recognizing that this is not as easy as perhaps some of them thought it was going to be.
No, I think back then everybody was quite excited. And they wanted to trial new tech solutions, and we had to go through that phase, I think, to understand what worked and what didn't work. And now there's much more pressure, financially, but also with things like AI coming. I think the CEOs are looking at return on investment, and they're looking at where are the efficiency gains we can have from the use of PropTech. So it's just much more focused investment in PropTech, I'd say.
So in terms of, I guess on both sides of the the lens that you can see it from, both the tech companies that are members of yours or through through the association that you're seeing, both the ones that are sort of new but also scaling where there's actual success. And then B, on the flip side, the customer of that, with now Real Estate UK, the new industry body, looking forward for like the next year, 2 years, sort of like how do you, what do you see in terms of adoption and scale, but also what do you think is needed? Like, what would you sort of call upon to either of those groups to say, look, the only way this is really going to happen, and again, from my lens and this podcast lens is around predominantly like how do we make buildings better and smarter and more sustainable, but I guess generally the sort of digital transformation of the industry, kind of what do you see as still needed to kind of help accelerate some of that change, and like where are the blockers still?
So I think in terms of what I'm seeing working now, before I come on to what needs to change, I think the tech companies that are able to integrate with existing platforms are the ones that are seeing much more success, because it seems to me that the CTOs and the heads of innovation want to kind of own their tech stack. They want to have their own sort of central platform rather than, as you say, adding in another dashboard. They want to work with PropTech, but they want it to integrate into what they have, and they want to own that and shape that. So I think we're seeing those that can integrate with that and integrate with kind of existing workflows and don't disrupt behaviour too much are the ones that seem to be working well, and the AI first ones as well. And in terms of what that looks like in the market, I think we're seeing a good kind of amount of traction in terms of tools that can help you understand where to invest and how your assets are performing. So kind of that asset management and risk, and looking at your portfolio. And then in the ESG reporting space, I think that's still a growing area, but I think it's more about not just having another dashboard, but how do you actually automate some of the data collection that you might need and link that in with your finance systems and your risk modelling. So again, it's the integration of all of that, not just having a siloed solution on monitoring your energy performance of a building.
I was going to ask you that actually, just on that. I mean, ESG terminology, but because funny enough, I was with a founder yesterday who they initially started out as a sustainability quote unquote or even decarbonisation platform, and they're like, no, we've now pivoted. We're now just an asset management platform. And it makes a lot of sense because depending on who your customer is, you end up being sort of siloed into the sustainability piece. But B, like you say, well, you're only going to solve some element of the problem there.
Yeah.
And you're always going to come up against the internal kind of friction of like, well, that sits in the asset management platform, or that is the asset manager. So why not try and tackle that whole thing? And actually, I think, linked to that is some of the problems or challenges that we have in the industry, just in terms of how fragmented it is, and just the workflows that we have. I think for a long time, and I certainly was one of them, was like, there's never, you're never going to solve that. Like, that's just so complex. I'm actually starting to see companies that are solving it, very early on, and obviously AI is helping, drive a lot of that. But just the complexity of variables that go into making decisions about capex or opex or whatever it is. For a long time, like I say, I was like, I can't see ever that really being solved. But now I'm like, actually, that's getting pretty close. So you're starting to see, I guess, the vision, that workflow of a proper digital workflow, actually, of, as you say, like data comes in, and a lot of these things that I think, certainly I've spent 20 years banging my head against a brick wall sometimes with regard to data and getting information in, analysing it, synthesising it, and then producing an output. Give it a couple of years, and I think we'll just look back and go, my God, like, why were we spending so much time on that? And that is just now, click of a button, and there's just a digital workflow that captures the data and spits it out in a ready-to-go format. And I think we're not that far away from that. So I think there's a lot of efficiency that's clearly going to come. It's just, like you said earlier, it's just, you've got to be ready. You've got to find a way of getting your ducks in a row that can leverage that.
Yeah, and I think that is still the biggest hurdle. I had moderated a panel for RF and Yardi recently off the back of a report that they did, looking at, I think they surveyed, I want to say about 30 fund managers, looking at their use of technology and data, and how prepared they are to bring in AI as well. And they all said, about 100% of them said that they think that data reporting is going to be really important over the next 24 months. Mm-hmm. But only 28% of them said that actually they're making advancements in that space.
Okay, so, that's the gap. Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's still, and when I moderated a panel with some of the people that responded to that survey, they were all talking about the foundations and the plumbing and getting access to the data, and they said that there's no issue with the amount of data that's out there. It's just getting access to it in the right way, fixing the pipes to bring that data in to those central platforms to be able to then spit out the reports and all.
So I suppose jumping straight to the conclusion of that is, if you're in the market, if you're a platform, you're PropTech, whatever you want to call it, that's handling data, they're the problems you need to solve. It's how do you get data from one place to the other, basically.
I'd say so.
Rather than analysing it, synthesising it, and dashboarding it, it needs to be getting it, making it accessible, structuring it, and then feeding it into. And it sort of begs the question, I suppose, because a lot of PropTech companies, tech companies are funded by VCs. There's a sort of classic SaaS model of scalability, and that's sort of driven a lot of the market. But actually, what you're saying, which is 100%, and I remember, in my time at JLL, even when I was at LaSalle, it was like, we kind of need it to look like this, and we kind of need to be slightly bespoke, and our core, our enterprise data warehouse looks like this, and we kind of want the workflow to look like that. And you often had conversations with, the SaaS provider going, well, that's not how we deliver it, and it's sort of cookie cutter. And actually, what you're describing is, well, maybe it's a little bit more. You need to bring a little bit more bespokeness to it, and whether that is going to influence the sort of prop tech service offering, or whether it's the traditional, I guess, enterprise sort of tech providers that will benefit from this, I suppose, in terms of helping to build out that central core, to make it flexible, to make it available to pull in this data. I'd be just curious to kind of know, like, to your point, if there's that gap, who closes that gap? Like, is that the prop tech's going to come in and try and solve that, or is that the traditional kind of enterprise techs, solutions and tech providers that help solve that? And clearly, on top of both of those, you need the right people with the right skill set, which sometimes doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would like to think that the prop techs can help to solve that issue.
Yeah, if they get it right, they can.
Yeah. But we are seeing, obviously, a slight sort of shift towards working with enterprise tech providers as well, the big giants, the Microsofts, etc.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I guess, how unique a real estate company's operations is and the workflow is compared to a non-real estate company. I don't know, because obviously these big tech providers, they span across multiple sectors. But yeah, that'd be interesting to see kind of how that evolves. And I guess as well, and frankly, I mean, I've been playing with it myself, but like, the ability to kind of code yourself and vibe code your own software. Maybe that's what, CTOs and the teams will be doing, is just figuring out, okay, how do we actually plug and play with all these different things and switching it out and changing it. It'd be really interesting. Look, one of the questions I ask all my guests is, and I think particularly relevant for you, is kind of what either problem are you trying to solve, but maybe expand on that. Like, what problem are you hearing and you're still seeing in the market that obviously we haven't yet covered, that you think someone needs to, I want someone to come solve this, or you think it needs to be solved? Curious to know. You might not have one, but I'm curious if you do.
Yeah, so I think one of the problems that we're trying to solve is this, and you mentioned it earlier, this kind of disparity between, you've got the large organisations who can invest in the right people to bring technology in and to run digital transformation programs, and then you've got the much smaller organisations that can't really afford to do that. Yeah. So one of the problems I'm trying to solve is to support those young, sort of smaller organisations who maybe don't have the same resources by leveraging the expertise and the insights and experiences of the individuals that work for the large organisations. So that's where the forum comes in and is doing that. Is giving people in the room that don't have huge teams behind them an idea of what they can learn and gain from those that have already been through that journey. And also just, I think, this kind of challenge of, is there more that the PropTechs can be doing to support with the execution and the implementation of technology versus what the real estate professionals need to be doing? I don't think that's quite clear yet. We had a debate on it a while ago. And I think we're trying to really surface those tensions through the events programme. Yeah,
that's interesting, because there's two things there. One is, and I'm just curious to know on this, but in terms of now the Real Estate UK membership, is it still kind of tends to be the larger organisations, or is, our members, do you get that sort of longer tail of members as part of that?
Well, it's actually a bit of a mix, because one of the organisations that will be part of Real Estate UK is the IPF. Who have individual members.
Right, okay.
So some of those individuals work for some of the big corporates, but some of them don't. So we will have a mixture of...
So there's ability to connect in with that, because that's always been... real estate such a... certainly when you go out of that sort of top, 10%, it's suddenly like, there's so many people to go and engage with, so to be able to sort of capture that. But it sounds like there's a great opportunity there. I mean, by the sounds of it, you're really trying to help, and I think that's a smart idea, is trying to plug the expertise from those that have it to those that don't. But obviously, I suppose, just in terms of like people out there in the market offering as advice and support in a sort of fractional or consulting basis to to those types of organisations.
I should say as well, on the flip side to that, we're also trying to make sure that PropTechs are better equipped to engage with real estate clients. And I think that's something that we've been doing since UKPA formed. And some organisations will be better at it than others. But there is still, I think, a lot to be said for if you can just speak the same language, if you can really understand the problems of your clients or potential clients, what's actually keeping them up at night. Because your solution may not be the answer to that problem, but at least if you understand what is keeping them up at night, you have the whole context and can get the tone right.
101 sort of consulting sales, but it's just, what is your problem, Mr. Client? And then figuring out by sort of the dark arts of, well, this is how this solution sort of fits into that problem. It's so important to understand that context. But also, and it's funny you mentioned the thing earlier, because I remember thinking this. In fact, I spoke to one of the, I won't mention the name, but I spoke to one of the tech companies about this, is that, the sort of classic kind of SaaS model of like, here's the pitch, here's the solution, right? There's sort of 6 months, 12 months onboarding, and then, off you go, and it's kind of self-serve. It's like, okay, that keeps the cost down. It's, versus the consulting model, whatever, there's lots of pluses, but the onboarding, it's really tough. And like, is it me? And then I've got to get all my users to sort of log in. And And one of the things I said to him was, as well as that sort of, I mean, there's a sort of onboarding cost as a lot of these things have, but you should also offer an optional extra, which is actually come in and work with the team that's procuring you, but maybe also the CTO or the tech team, or whoever it is, to actually like sit alongside them and say, look, this is how you maximize the value of the platform that we're offering you.
Yeah.
Because I think too often, and I know the tension here, and I've spoken to enough founders to know, right, the SaaS model and the classic VC model of, we don't want to do any consulting, it just needs to be kind of repeatable business. But there's such my concern would be the failure rate of, the value, and also just not getting enough value out of that solution. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And whether that's the company themselves or whether they partner up and offer, a sort of advisory, consulting type, onboarding solution, I don't know. But I think a lot of real estate companies, big and small, frankly, but probably, as you say, certainly on that sort of longer tail, they really need that help to help onboard it. And I think it's like anything, right? It's like any app you use or any technology you use. Once you've used it 3 or 4 times, then it becomes native. But on that first go, here's the login, and then you come back to it 3 weeks later. It's like, what's my login? I'd forgotten.
Yeah.
And so, it's very easy to that sales pitch, do it, sign it, done, move on. Okay, how do we actually keep maintaining that? Second question, which maybe sort of links to that then, is if there's magic wand, but if something, and now that you've got, I guess, a greater plug-in to government, be curious to kind of know if you've got thoughts on this, but if you could get one thing kind of done, magic wand, by government, by business, maybe the sort of real estate community, but business leaders and or individuals, all three. Curious, do you have one?
That's a tough question.
You've got magic wand, anything.
This is probably quite unrealistic, to be honest. But but I do think now that the government want to ensure that the UK is a leader in AI. Yeah. That's a key focus, and we've got industry, lots of industries, not just real estate, trying to grapple with what it means for them. And then you've kind of got this looming, slightly dark cloud, which is if we don't get ready for AI, then potentially that's quite disruptive. Yeah. And what does that mean for society? Yeah. To me, it feels like, and maybe this will come from the sort of AI strategy that the government is working on, but it feels like there needs to at least be some sort of support, guidance, something to help businesses prepare for this, and local authorities as well. Yeah. And I think they are doing that with local authorities, but
aspects of society, I think. I actually saw something. I think PwC have done some work with government to come out with some online training, free to use online training around AI. And in fact, there's some construction focused bits of it. So we should probably, I can put that on the show notes as well. But I think you're right. 100% right. You just think about where and how this is going to influence and impact people.
Especially for the smaller organisations who don't have the budgets. Maybe the large organisations, fair enough, they should be investing their profits into their organisations, into their teams to prepare for this and upskill. But for the smaller
don't get me started on the kind of social consequences of this and what and how, and okay. So more I guess more signposting and better support and information from government to help us navigate through this. Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Sammy, thank you very much. Great conversation.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's it for this week's episode of The Future We Build. I want to thank you so much for listening to us wherever you are. If you're navigating these same challenges, from pricing in climate risk, decarbonising buildings, or if you're scaling a new product or solution, join us on LinkedIn. Search for me, Alex Edds, or follow our official page at The Future We Build. That's where we break down these episodes further, discuss the topics and discussions, and connect you to the leaders engaged in this mission. This show and the guests I invite will be influenced by the conversations we have on LinkedIn. So if you have ideas or would like to hear the thoughts of an industry leader, let me know, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you there. You can find the show notes and full transcripts on our website. And if you found today's session valuable, please hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you for listening. I'm Alex Edds, and I'll see you next time.